Before we start this presentation, I want to ask you guys a question. If you think that Shakespeare can save a life, please raise your hand. Okay. Now, if you believe that Shakespeare cannot save a life, raise your hand. Awesome. By the end of this presentation, we hope to persuade you into our idea that Shakespeare can save a life. So by the end of this presentation, be prepared to have that mindset.
My name is Laura Bates, and the title of my book is Shakespeare Saved My Life, 10 Years in Solitary with the Bard. And briefly, what the book chronicles is the 10 years that I spent working in solitary confinement, teaching Shakespeare to the prisoners there. And at the same time, it also parallels my story, my experiences with one particular prisoner who spent 10 years living in solitary confinement. And we learn his background story, what led to his incarceration to begin with, and most importantly, we learn how Shakespeare did literally save this prisoner's life, and also the impact it had on many other prisoners as well.
Throughout the past couple of weeks, we've been reading the novel Shakespeare Saved My Life by Lauren Bates. There is a very controversial question that many people are asking each other, and it's, can Shakespeare actually save a life? And I personally do believe that Shakespeare can save a life because it's evidenced in the book multiple times. The way Newton expresses that Shakespeare truly has saved his life. For example, in chapter 42, That's Freedom, it's the chapter where Newton, after 10 years of being in the shoe unit, is going to be released into the general population. And in this chapter, Bates is confronted with the idea that he will most likely be transferred to another jail. Because of this, she says, whenever one of her students leaves the program, she asks them, or she gives them a survey questioning, what has Shakespeare done for you? And in this, Newton gives her a slip of paper and he writes, Shakespeare saved my life. It shows a picture in the book. It just says, Shakespeare saved my life. And another very important point that I saw was in chapter 75, named Revelation. In this chapter, he's writing to Dr. Bates, and it's a very powerful quote, I think. It's the very last line of the chapter. It says, the answer is no, I will never kill again. Because obviously, he's there because he killed someone, right? Well, we're faced throughout the chapters that Newton had thought about killing himself. And because he will never kill again, he will never be able to kill himself. Therefore, Shakespeare can save a life.
I personally do believe that Shakespeare can save a life. A certain chapter that stuck out to me was chapter 50, Shakespeare Could Save Your Life Too. At the beginning of the chapter, Bates talks about why she does what she does, and that is to make the prisoners less violent when they eventually get back to the streets. The conviction that drove her work was that Shakespeare saves the lives of potential future victims. Her research also confirmed this statement. In fact, of the hundreds of the prisoners who have been in the program, some for months, some for years, not one committed a violent offense. When she tested this, she saw that prisoners in her program agreed. A man named Leonard said that it caused him to seek healing and redemption. He also says that the program helps relieve their stress and confusions. There is a large portion of that population, the murder population, that only need a slight influence to do different. The prisoners go on to say yes, Shakespeare has saved a few lives.
Many people believe that the choices you make will determine where you end up in the future. However, while reading Shakespeare Saved My Life, juveniles at risk can be pre-exposed to the novel before doing something they may regret, or something that could possibly even throw them behind bars. Therefore, Shakespeare can save a life, not only physically but mentally as well. It certainly does provide some insight to how many may feel. This novel opens their eyes to the idea that they are not alone after all, and that there is someone else out in the world that can actually relate to what goes through their mind. On page 185, Newton even goes into explaining how Shakespeare has been labeled and perceived to the wrong group of people this whole entire time. Maybe you associate Shakespeare to that highfalutin class of society. You are mistaken if you think he targeted that class. Shakespeare is telling our story, the story of complex, conflicted people who are facing real issues, who have real problems.
So my reason as to why Shakespeare can save a life is because in chapter 41, Dr. Bates is describing how she can tell Newton is on the boat again because he is getting unfocused and he's got wandering eyes, and she basically tells him that the boat is not his liberty. And the quote that I picked was him finishing her sentence. He says, "Shakespeare is my liberty, he finished my sentence, that's true, and you are my liberty." And to me, that kind of proves that Shakespeare saved his life, because she goes on to say that I'm not your liberty, Shakespeare is, which is true, because it allows him to have mental freedom and gets him out of that mental prison that he's been in since the beginning of the book, which was kind of what her plan was this whole time, was to save him from that. You know, it made him have suicidal thoughts, and he was quiet and subtle, he didn't talk, he didn't move, just put him in a dark place.
That's all, folks.